Hello, hello. It's Steve here. Just wanted to take the time to share what I've experienced for the last 54 years. I just had a birthday on December 20th, and people have told me I should write a book because of all the stuff I've experienced in life. I meet quite a few people who don't really have that much life experience, and then I see a lot of people on YouTube have lots of experiences. Like one real inspirational guy out there, his name's Timothy Johnson. He has Truck House Life channel up in Girdwood, Alaska. He travels quite a bit. He actually got started in whitewater rafting. He's really evolved over the past almost 2 decades. Probably should be dead because of some of the stuff he's been through, and I feel the same way. I'm lucky to be alive a couple of times. I should have probably been killed when I was 15. So a lot of people don't make it that long on this planet. When you're young, you have a tendency to think that, you know, you're invincible and there's unlimited resources and things are just going to work out. Like I definitely was born with rose-colored glasses on. We lived in one of the nicest homes in the small town that we lived in. I didn't know that, you know, that was unusual. My earliest memories in childhood was probably like in early 1970s, 1972. It's the earliest I can really remember. I was born at the end of '69. I don't remember anything prior to growing up in western Arkansas in a small town out in the country, really fairly isolated from global society, so to speak. That's true for a lot of people depending on where you start out on the planet. Grew up really naive, thinking that most people are nice people. Life has taught me otherwise, that most people are not very nice people. The small percentage of humans on the planet are nice people. Most people are extremely full of fear and extremely self-centered. From what I've experienced, most people don't think very healthily toward themselves or others. It's sad, you know, because everybody could work hard and get along together and work as a team, but unfortunately that's just not the case. Who knows why, right? I remember when I was a kid, I think this was like 1976. I remember 1976 was when a glass Liberty Bell bank fell off my chest of drawers and broke. So that was a pretty early memory. I also remember going to a guy's commercial chicken house with my dad. This guy was friends with my mom and dad and his wife, so we were kind of like family friends. We hung out, went to the lake and stuff together. But I remember him throwing a tin of Copenhagen chewing tobacco on the ground. It was empty, but it had like enough for like maybe a half a pinch or a quarter of a pinch. So I was really young. I mean, this was, it had to have been in the mid 70s, so I couldn't have been like more than 4 or 5 years old. And I picked up that Copenhagen chewing tobacco tin, and I got that little bit of tobacco out of there and put it in my mouth, and was acting like a grown-up, right? Being cool. That was when you're really young, you want to be cool like the grown-ups. I remember coming home after being at the chicken houses for an hour or so, and it was basically like dinner time, and mom served like some macaroni and cheese, and after dinner I was really sick to my stomach and I threw up. I realized that Copenhagen was not for me. The next thing I remember was the year Elvis died, and I had no idea. I was so young, I had no idea who Elvis was, but my babysitter was crying, and I didn't know why she was crying. Some dude named Elvis died. Like, oh, okay. And my dad built a big house in 1978. It was like 3,000 square feet, a custom rock house, 6 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, pool table room, full wet bar, and drum set up there eventually, like a trap set. And we have rattan furniture up there. It was kind of like the guest area when my parents would entertain. We had 4 picture windows looking out over a waterfall creek that ran beside our house. It was really an ideal setting. Before the mid 80s even showed up, my dad's business kind of took a strange turn. He had got talked into going into sales management with Snap-on. But when he started, he had the worst performing Snap-on tool dealership in the region, and he brought it up to #1 in the region. So Snap-on management noticed that and said, hey, could you go teach other Snap-on tool dealers how to be better Snap-on tool dealers, be more successful? So he got talked into going into management, and then my dad did not do well in management with Snap-on. They did not get along, and he left Snap-on, and then he tried to start a Matco tool dealership, and that was a brand new name at the time. Mac existed, M-A-C, Mac Tools, but Matco was a new startup brand, and that did not go well for my dad because it didn't have a following. Snap-on had the number one following at the time in the early 80s. Then my dad ended up filing for bankruptcy, and my mom asked him for a divorce. So my mom had started going through real estate school, and my dad moved just about a mile north of where our house was. He lived in a trailer park, and he was selling chemicals for Madison Bionics, and he stayed around for 1 year, and then he ended up moving back up to Minnesota, where his family was from in the early days. He still had family up in Minnesota. He moved in with an uncle in Little Falls who was retired from the Navy. I don't know how long he lived with him, not more than a year, and he ended up getting a sales job in St. Paul with Electrolux. He did that until my senior year in high school. My mom had remarried after about a year, just shy of a year. She met somebody at church, and they decided to get married. And then after my parents had gotten divorced, my mom sold the house 1 year later, and then she relocated about 30 miles down the road to get a job with Century 21 Realty. She started selling real estate. She had started selling real estate in the area where we live, but she needed a bigger market in order to actually make a living, and ended up going through high school at Alma, Arkansas, which compared to where I'd been living was like the bigger city, right? Much bigger school, much different demographic than what I'd experienced in the small town where I grew up out in the country. So we didn't have any traffic on the roads around the house that my dad had built. We were like 5 miles out of town, out in the country, and there was just little one-lane dirt roads that went by our house, and I rode my dirt bike every day around on the dirt roads and on trails, and went out with my bird dog. And so living out in the country, wasn't really exposed to other people that much. And then it was a big change, to move into the town where my mom ended up selling real estate while I went through high school. We had neighbors across the street, had neighbors next door, and neighbors back behind us, neighbors everywhere, which I wasn't used to. So that was a bit of a culture shock. And relatively speaking, it was still isolated, from what was going on in the rest of the world. We didn't travel a whole bunch. On Christmases, we would go out to California, see my grandparents in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. La Puente, California, San Bernardino. I used to remember always getting sick whenever we would fly out to California because the air quality in California was so bad compared to what I was used to in Arkansas, where there was basically no pollution. I remember used to fly through the clouds, dropping into LA, and remember everything being like a brown, murky air color. It was always crystal clear blue in Arkansas. We didn't have any murky brown air. Yeah, getting sick that week, every Christmas for the week we were in California, I would always be sick. There was definitely something different going on in California than what was going on in pristine western Arkansas. My mom sold real estate the whole time I was going through high school. My dad ended up marrying a lady in Minnesota. I think he had a house built in Apple Valley because he had veterans benefits, so it was pretty easy for him to get into a home. He knew how to take advantage of his veterans benefits. He was in the Navy. He was a plane captain in the Navy. And he went through a divorce after just a couple of years of being married, I guess. He must have been married in like 85-ish, and by 87, 88 time frame, he'd already gotten a divorce because he came home and found his wife in bed with the karate teacher. So that didn't go over too well. And I ended up having to go get my dad and get all of his stuff out of storage, and that didn't end well. I'm sure my dad didn't see all that stuff coming. I think this is what happens when someone becomes an alcoholic. My dad had become an alcoholic, and that really screwed up his relationships, and at least with my mom. And then it's really sad. I went and got my dad and brought him back to the little town we lived in western Arkansas, and My mom had gotten another divorce from the guy that she had married, that she met at church. He turned out to be a pretty strange character, and she asked him for a divorce. And then my mom and dad got back together for about a year, and that didn't work out. And then dad moved out to California and lived with his sister for a little bit. And then he met a lady from Mexico, and he got married. She already had an 8-year-old son. So basically he started family number 3, and he's all the way like 1,500 miles away, however far away western Arkansas is from Ontario, California. And so dad just basically was no longer anywhere around our life, which I really didn't understand. I mean, it really sucks, man. You don't actually get raised by your parents, but I know it happens a lot in this crazy world. Orphans, that's kind of a twisted way. If you're just an orphan, then you're always poor. But when you start out feeling like you're wealthy and you got parents that got it all figured out, it's really weird, when all of a sudden all of it disappears. That's like a real roller coaster ride psychologically. I was an honors grad in high school. I was actually fairly bored in high school, but when I got offered honors classes, I took all honors classes my junior year, and I dramatically raised my GPA from like a 2.7 up to like a 3.6 or 3.8 or something like that. I graduated 17 out of 134, and I was really into bodybuilding in high school. I competed for Mr. Teenage Arkansas, and I placed 5th out of 12 in my first competition in Little Rock, Arkansas. That was in '89. My training partner placed number 1 in the light heavyweight, and it took 12th place 2 weeks later at the Junior National. So I had a really great, experienced training partner. He was 28 and I was 19. I had started college. I was pursuing a degree in exercise science, a 4-year bachelor's degree. And the Navy called me. My dad had been in the Navy, so I kind of had that in the back of my head subconsciously, and I didn't know if it was a good idea or a bad idea, but I knew it was income, and I'd never had a decent income. I'd had grocery store job, bagger, sackers they call it, and I used to clean the milk case on Sundays at the small grocery store in our town. I made car payments on my first car that I bought, which was an '81 Celica Supra. It was pretty neat, but when you're young, you don't really know what you have. I had a tendency to drive too fast and do stupid stuff like smoke cigars and drink beer, and on the weekends, that kind of stuff. Too much crazy partying, and yeah, it wasn't too smart. But I think that's one of the things, being raised by somebody who drinks and not really having someone around to set a good example for you. You kind of have a tendency to do the wrong things when you don't have a good mentor, a good role model at home. My mom was a good role model. She wasn't a drinker. She was a decent, healthy person, decent mentally. I guess she came from a more respectable background than my dad did in terms of family. They were definitely closer as a family. My mom's family was really pretty close, down to earth, simple people. My dad's family was not very close. Definitely a family of drinkers. It was very enjoyable to be around. Really materialistic kind of people. That's why I was never really close to my dad. Went in the Navy. I was a top grad in the Navy. They offered me the nuclear program, and I said, no, what are the chances of me being on a submarine? They said, oh, pretty good. And I said, well, I don't think I want to do that. And they said, well, how about avionics? So I ended up going into avionics, and I was an avionics tech on the F-18 Hornet, and I graduated number 1 out of 60. My first 9 months school was 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday in Billington, Tennessee. I graduated number 1 out of 60, and then I had a chance to put in a special request for advanced training, and I did that advanced training. I graduated number 2 out of 5, 3 months of advanced training. It was called AFTA. My first school was called AVA 1, and then went to system school in Cecil Field, Florida, and ended up meeting my wife. My girlfriend in high school flaked out on me. She split when I went in boot camp. She just totally disappeared out of my life, which broke my heart because I thought we were friends. And people are not what they appear to be. They act like your friend, but yeah, they're no more your friend than a stray dog. I ended up getting married to one of my classmates' cousins. He asked me to go to his uncle's on a weekend when we were in Cecil Field, Florida, in school together. He says, hey, why don't we go to my uncle's down in Clearwater? So it was a couple hours away. We drove down there. I had a car and he had money because he didn't have a car, and ended up meeting his cousin, was a year older than me, and she had a job, and we really seemed to hit it off, like friends-wise, and we quickly got married. We only knew each other like 3 weekends. We got married, and then I got orders to Naval Air Station Lemoore, California, just south of Fresno, California, in the San Joaquin Valley. And we were married for a couple years. I became a second-class petty officer like shortly after arriving at the squadron because I'd already was E4. I never was an E1. I never was an E3. Right out of boot camp, I became an E2 because I had a year of college. And when I went from that first school to the second school, I got 2 pay grade right away. I signed a 2-year extension. So shortly after arriving at the squadron, I had been in the Navy a total of a year and 11 months. I was a second-class petty officer, and I went through leadership training because they thought I would probably be the next work center supervisor. That was called TQL, Total Quality Leadership, which is a spin-off of Total Quality Management in the private sector. And then after 2 years being married, my wife decided she wanted a divorce. That really sucked. I didn't want a divorce. I thought we were friends, and I thought we could work on our marriage. She didn't want to work on our marriage, so actually at that time I was introduced to a Bible fellowship through one of the reservists that came in to drill with our squadron. I was attached full-time to a reserve squadron, and I would see these reservists 1 weekend a month, and my friend that was a reservist or an acquaintance, I've learned not to call people friends. He was an acquaintance, and he knew that I was depressed, so he said, "Hey man, why don't you go to my friends for the weekend?" I thought, okay, sounds fun, let's go to the barbecue. So I went, and then we hadn't gone through with the divorce yet, so I met these people that had a Bible fellowship, and I thought, wow, that's what my wife and I need. I'll go tell my wife about this Bible fellowship, and she did not like that at all. She was totally turned off. So I gave her the divorce. I let her pack her bags. I took all the bills. I didn't make her responsible for any of our bills. I took all the bills because she didn't have a job and I had an income. And she got on the plane. I took her to the airport. She got on the plane, and I never saw her again. Now she decided to be gay, and she adopted kids, and she's got a partner. So I've just learned not to rush into relationships with people. Most of the people that I thought were decent people in my life have screwed me over. Like one of my closest acquaintances in high school is now serving 30 years in prison. It's so disgusting what he did that I don't even want to mention what he did, but he didn't kill anybody, but it's almost as bad. And I thought he was a decent guy in high school, just like I thought my girlfriend was a decent person, just like I thought my wife was a decent person, and I thought my dad was a decent person. There's so many people who are just so phony, it's unreal. One of the reasons why I almost died was because my mom allowed me to get a 440 Kawasaki when I was 15. And I was just going from the high school football game to the pizza parlor. This is before I got my first car. And this pickup truck pulled out in front of me. It was just after dark. I was headed up the 4-lane highway. There was a turn lane in the middle, so it was 5 lanes across the road, 2 on one side, 2 on the other, and the turn lane in the middle. And this guy pulled out from the Kentucky Fried Chicken to go to the gas station across the street, and he didn't see me, so I T-boned him, and somehow I landed on my feet. I had a little scratch on my hand, but that was it, barely even a nick. And I landed on my feet. I guess an angel grabbed me and picked me up and set me down, but somehow I was unharmed and probably should have been dead. And then when I got out of the Navy, in March of 1993. I got a job baking donuts for a year for a mom and pop donut shop. It sounded interesting and definitely a break from the military environment and simple family-owned mom and pop startup donut shop. And I thought, well, that's not too bad. It didn't hardly pay anything, but it was a steady job. It wasn't very far from my apartment, and it just gave me a time to kind of think about what I wanted to do. After a year, I asked them for a raise, and they said they couldn't give me a raise. So I thought, well, I need to go find something else to do. So I put in my notice, and I sold cars for like 3 or 4 months at a Chevrolet, Oldsmobile, Cadillac, Geo dealership. And that was kind of like, those people weren't very nice. I mean, it was like working for some devils. I mean, I sold a few cars, but I really didn't enjoy the dealership that I worked for. They had a terrible attitude toward customers and their sales force. It was very, very rude. And I thought, wow, how do they expect to have a positive reputation being so rude to people? It didn't make any sense to me. So they ended up replacing me with some girl with a lot of makeup and a short skirt. And I was kind of bummed out. And I went to the mall just to kind of walk around. I met this nice elderly lady. She was working at a Contel Cellular kiosk, and she says, "Hey, we're hiring. Go see my manager. She finds out you're in the Navy, she'll hire you right away." I thought, wow, okay. So I went and met the manager. Yep, they hired me right away. I ended up managing a kiosk at a Naval Exchange Shopping Center for Contel Cellular for a whole year. I usually had some of the best sales numbers in our whole sales force. The one December that I worked, I had outsold the Fresno store. I sold 29 phones, and they basically told me that not to expect to have any decent numbers because Christmas time is always slow, that people aren't buying phones at Christmas, they're buying other stuff for their whatever. And I blew up a whole bunch of balloons with a helium tank they had at the department store. I borrowed the big helium tank from the department store, and the manager said, "Sure, you can borrow our helium tank." And I blew up this big bouquet of red balloons, and people, because the kiosk was in the center of the department store, people saw those balloons no matter where they were in the store, so they'd come over to find out what was going on, and I ended up selling them a phone. So I sold almost 30 phones, almost a phone every day that December. Outsold the Fresno store, which had 2 million people to serve. I was down there on the naval base with a few thousand people to serve. So anyway, that's kind of an eye-opener. You know, I soon realized that it wasn't me who had the bad attitude. You don't have a bad attitude if you're an honors grad. You don't have a bad attitude if you graduate number 1 out of 60. You don't have a bad attitude if you have great sales numbers. It's obvious it wasn't me that had the bad attitude. I ended up moving back to Arkansas and got to see my mom again for the first time in quite a while. And my mom and stepdad, my mom got married while she was in real estate. She married a guy that was retired Air Force. They were together for over 2 decades. He was 11 years older than her. He passed away at 84. He was comfortably retired twice. He was retired from the Teamsters. He drove for UPS. He started out as a package delivery guy, and then he retired as a semi-truck driver for UPS. So he had his Teamsters pension. And my parents traveled quite a bit. My mom and stepdad traveled quite a bit. So that was my mom's third husband. And he was actually a decent guy, relatively speaking, right? He had been a smoker, so he had COPD, and he had to do breathing treatments 4 times a day. And he's pretty much a couch potato. He was a nice person to talk to, but he wasn't very physically active. And they did come out and see me when we were training in Fallon, Nevada 1 year, and they came out and saw me while I was in the Navy. And my mom and stepdad came out, and we went to Reno. I remember blowing $20 in nickels on a slot machine. Realized I had gotten my fill of gambling. It's all the gambling I needed. It was a fun outing, I guess. A little bit of kind of boring entertainment. When I went to truck driving school in Arkansas, that was in Little Rock. I went to Harold Ives truck driving school, but then their school was in Stuttgart. So I went through their truck driving school in Stuttgart, drove for them until Thanksgiving that year. I went there in the summer and then drove until Thanksgiving, and I was kind of scared, like driving the big semi-truck out on the road. At first it was scary. I had never traveled like that and seen the country. Didn't really know what was out there. But I ended up driving 7 years over the road. I drove for a few different companies. I drove for Lippold and Arnett out of Carlinville, Illinois. And I drove contract freighters out of Joplin. I drove for J.B. Hunt for a very short time. I did not like J.B. Hunt at all. It was a very, very impersonable and terrible equipment. It's the roughest equipment you can imagine. It was ridiculous. I drove flatbed. In '97, I drove for my uncle on a farm for harvest, driving the hopper bottom trailers. But most of my experience was driving refrigerated, like frozen chicken and beef, and some chemicals, polyester resin. I drove flatbed. I did a few loads of flatbed, like I've hauled plywood. I've had to tarp a full plywood load. That's very physically challenging. Those tarps are really heavy. And I hauled skyscraper windows to New Jersey out of western Arkansas. I don't remember where I picked those up, but where the load originated. But Took them to a skyscraper construction project in New Jersey. That truck didn't have armrests. That was a very, very uncomfortable. I've had some good jobs and some strange, very not so good jobs, terrible jobs. My last job over the road was with Biography Lines, and I tried their lease to own program, and that was a waste of time. Gosh, there's so much stuff I've tried that has not panned out. I think that's the reason why people say you should write a book. I thought, well, it'd probably be more meaningful if you just heard it from the horse's mouth instead of reading a book. I've told people if I could put a title on my biography, it would be When All Else Fails, Clean Windows, because window cleaning has actually been one of the more lucrative things that I've done, even though it's seasonal. Window cleaning has paid me pretty interestingly, sometimes, versus how hard I used to have to work just to get a load delivered. I used to make like $150 to $200 a day when I was driving the semi truck. Like $200 a day would have been a good day, or $250. The only way I made decent money was just if I unloaded the truck. If I would haul like frozen steak to the Northeast, that would pay really decent, a couple $100 to unload the truck. I would make more money unloading the truck than I did to drive the truck there, which is kind of insane. When you don't have anything to compare it to, like I hear people even today, or ever since I quit driving semi truck, that people say, oh yes, I make great money driving a semi truck. Well, I had like 3 or 4 different jobs in the semi truck driving industry. I never made the kind of money that some people say they make. And I thought, wow, I tried my best to find a decent paying job in this commercial truck driving industry, but never panned out. So after a year with Biography Lines, I ended up just saying to heck with it, and I'm not driving over the road no more. And I had a rabbit farm on the land. My mom had kept an acre and a half next to that house that my dad had built way back in the 1978. And I asked her what she was going to do with that land. She said, nothing. I'm just paying a little bit of taxes on it every year. So I went there. I moved a travel trailer out there and built rabbit barns and I didn't know anything about rabbits. I got into rabbits because I was interested in raising bait worms, or composting worms, and I discovered that the rabbit manure would be like a perfect food source for the worms, so it'd be a good system. And I learned about potential of raising commercial meat rabbits, and I did that for 6 years. It took about a year or 2 years before I decided to get into the rabbits, but maybe about a year, roughly about a year. That first year I started acquiring the rabbits and learning like what kind of equipment they needed, and I found used equipment from people who are getting out of the rabbit growing business. I don't know, for whatever reason, health reasons, age. I did that for 6 years, and then I gave the farm to my sister, and I moved to New Mexico and worked in construction in the Taos area. Lived there for 2 years. I just used a bicycle. I just moved out there on a bus. I just took the bus out there, and I lived car free for 2 years. Got a lot of exercise. I was at 7,000 feet, rode the bicycle everywhere. Actually delivered pizza for Domino's on a motorized bicycle for a few months until the winter set in. I didn't do it through the winter, but I did it in the summer and fall, and had a motorized bicycle. It got like 200 miles per gallon, and had a cargo bicycle trailer, little burly Nomad with a cargo rack. And so, I worked a few different construction jobs. I had a job delivering furniture for a fancy furniture store. It was Mountain Comfort Furnishings. Now it's called the Red Arrow Emporium, but at least the last time I knew. But delivered furniture a little bit. Hurt my neck really bad doing some furniture moving for one of our customers. They said, could you come do some furniture moving for us on the weekend? So a part-time guy that I worked with joined me, and we went and moved this furniture, and he let the couch that we were carrying out of the front living room out over the banisters and down the stairs. He let this couch shift on my neck, and it crushed my neck. That took me out of work for a couple of weeks. I had to go to the chiropractor a couple times and recovered from that, thank God. It was just a pinched nerve. And at the end of summer 2010, I decided to move to Austin, and I used one of my motorized bicycles that I had built. It's a big, surly big dummy with an 8-foot Bikes at Work cargo trailer behind it. I used it and moved 740 miles from Taos to Austin, Texas. I slept in a tent every night, And then after I got into Austin, I stayed with some people that I met through a church group, and I stayed with them for a couple of weeks. And then when I was out looking for a job, I met a guy, and he had an arborist service. He says, if you haven't found a job in a couple of weeks, give me a call and I'll put you to work. So he gave me $20 just for the, to help me out. And so 2 weeks had gone by. I didn't have a job yet. I just called him up and said, hey man, I haven't found a job yet. I'll take you up on that job with the tree service. I did that until the winter. He was actually really kind. He let me stay with them, and I basically worked with him for 10% of the job. It was kind of a win-win situation for both of us. I was reasonable with him, and he was very generous with me, so that worked out pretty good. And then he was a decent guy, and his family was nice. And he had actually come up from in the pizza industry too when he was younger, and he went out and bought a chainsaw and had been an arborist the rest of his adult life. He'd done pretty well. He learned how to rent cranes. He learned how to take trees off of houses, after a tornado storm and that kind of thing. So he learned how to do some decent sized work. And when his work dried up, which was also seasonal, it kind of reminds me of window cleaning. He didn't have any work for me in the winter, so I had to go get a different job. And I got a job through the Workforce Solutions, which is the employment office in Texas, Workforce Solutions. And I got a job through a staffing service, and ended up working at a factory assembling LED parking lot lights. And that paid a whopping $8 an hour, but it was better than not having a job, kinda, I guess. And I trained for a 12-week fitness challenge because I didn't own a car. I was riding my bicycle every day to work, and I would ride my bicycle 30 minutes from home. I ended up renting a small trailer from a guy out 7 miles out of San Marcos, and I rode my bicycle every morning to the gym, which was 7 miles. It took 30 minutes. I would make that ride in the dark before the sun came up. The gym opened at 5:30. I would lift weights. I'd take my food, my clothes for the day, work at the factory, get off at 4:30, go to the grocery store, get the food for the next day, and ride the 45 minutes back home, and did that every day. I have pictures on Body Space of that transformation challenge that I competed in, trying to win a $25,000 grand prize, but honestly, I don't think anybody won any money. I think it was a scam by bodybuilding.com, because the people who they said won didn't even actually have complete profiles. They're supposed to be holding up today's paper when they started, like wearing shorts, and then they're supposed to be holding up today's paper when they finished, and they weren't doing any of that on their profiles. So I question whether anybody got any money or not. I don't think anybody won. It was just a marketing scam to sell supplements by bodybuilding.com. Then my sister helped me move back to Rogers in March of 2011, like the beginning of April, the beginning of April 3rd. I rode my bicycle. I put what little bit of stuff I had in her storage unit, and I rode my bicycle with my little trailer to Indianapolis, and I stayed at a church camp for 3 weeks, and I went out every day and looked for a job in Martinsdale. It's halfway between Bloomington and the south side of Indianapolis. And I met a guy who invited me to stay with him. He worked as a cashier at a convenience store in Martinsdale. I stayed with him for a couple of weeks. I mowed the yard, went out with him. He had a paper route he did once a week, so we did that. And his wife was a secretary for an attorney or something. But I helped him decorate the garage for their oldest daughter's graduation party for high school. But anyways, after a couple weeks, his wife didn't like me for whatever reason. And he said, if I bought you a set of tires for your bicycle, could you keep going wherever it is you wanted to go? And I said, yeah, that sounds great. So I was going to the East Coast, but I decided that I might be better off if I went to Minnesota because it was closer and it was flat. Eden Prairie, Minnesota was supposed to be the best place to live in the United States. So I thought, well, I've never lived there before. Let's go see what that's all about. And I went to Eden Prairie. I didn't really like it. I stayed in Eden Prairie for a couple of weeks. And there's no resources. There's very few human resources, like if you need food or shelter or anything like that. They don't really offer anything like that over there. It's very, very weird, very pretentious, very cosmetic. And I ended up finding a church in Seward neighborhood, I ended up riding on the Greenway, which is kind of like people rollerblade on that, and people ride their bicycles on that, but it's a bicycle path that's paved all the way from one side of the metro to the other. I don't know where it ends on the east side, but it starts over around Eden Prairie, and it goes all the way to South Minneapolis. So I made that ride and found this church called Missio Dei. They own 3 houses, and that's where I started cleaning windows. I had bought window cleaning equipment in Texas with what money I had at the time, but I never cleaned any windows for money in Texas. There wasn't any demand. I went door to door for like 3 hours. I never found anybody who even wanted an estimate in San Marcos. When I got to Minneapolis, that's actually where the window cleaning demand was. I mean, it was some decent demand. I was surprised. I mean, I didn't know until I started going door to door and asking people if they wanted their windows cleaned. But I cleaned windows for a floral shop in Seward, and I cleaned windows at a guy's second-story apartment window, and we cleaned a house for the lady that owned the florist shop. That was up in like Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Parks, one of those Brooklyns. It's a northern suburb of the Twin Cities. And ended up getting my first statement book. I went door to door. By that fall, I had bought a 4-wheel drive minivan, and I was borrowing a stepladder from the church that I was staying with, and the one that owned the 3 houses, Missio Dei. I borrowed their extension ladder. It was 18-foot Stanley, and then I bought my own extension ladder by the end of or the beginning of fall, and I had the 4-wheel drive minivan. By the next, I tried to do snow removal that year. One of my customers sold me their $100 2-stroke Toro snowblower. I got my trailer, and I got a little tilt bed trailer to haul from Mills Fleet Farm to haul the snowblower. And then by that spring of 2012, there wasn't hardly any snow that year, so it was kind of a flop to be into snow removal. But by that next spring, I enclosed the trailer. I rented pure water filters from Smith Engineering in Chaska, and I put marketing on my trailer, put more marketing on my van. I did my first huge job on Lake of the Isles in early 2000. I don't know if it was mid-spring, late spring, early summer 2012. I did my first huge job in the southwest corner of Lake of the Isles. And that woke me up, in terms of how much demand there was for window cleaning. And obviously I had other smaller jobs come in. But by the end of that year, I went to Phoenix, Arizona. I discovered that there's almost no demand for window cleaning in Phoenix, Arizona. And I don't really like Phoenix at all. It's I'm allergic to something there in the winter. Something makes me feel like I have a cold the whole time I was there, and it just has a dirty feel. I'm just not into it. Lack of greenery. I really like the greenery of the Midwest, and the culture, the civilization of the Midwest. It's a much higher standard of living. People are much friendlier in the Midwest. So, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. I drove that little minivan. It was a 96 Mazda MPV. I drove that for 4 years, put 30-something thousand miles on it, sold it, bought a Chevy Express 1-ton, had it for a couple of years, tried to be an AMSOIL dealer, had all kinds of marketing. That didn't work. I bought a bus, had that for a couple of years. I sold the 1-ton van after I'd had it for a couple of years. I sold it for $5,000, only paid a couple thousand for it. But after I'd serviced the transmission, did all the cosmetics on it, put new front shocks on it, and fixed the fuel tank that was leaking, and put a new distributor in it and all that kind of stuff. Had it running pretty good, relatively speaking, compared to how I bought it. Yeah, it was very marketable, and put all that money into my bus. Had the bus for a couple of years. I went out to Indiana to get the bus, and at a Kurland bus just south of Warsaw, and it was an international bus, like 38 feet long, diesel pusher, had the DT466 engine, serviced all the fluids to AMSOIL, put on hand-cooked tires, and got some aluminum wheels for all the outer wheels so it looked nice. And there was a semi-truck salvage yard just down the road from where I was. I bought the bus and brought it back to Arkansas to my mom's, and fixed it up in her driveway. Painted it, did all the body work on it, painted it white, took all the seats out, built a bedroom in the rear. Oh man, built shelves for it. Did so much stuff. But I drove that bus to Minnesota, had it in a tiny house village up in Ogilvie, north of Mora, just outside of Mora, Minnesota, and got it stuck, broke a wire harness on it, had to fix that. Some of my avionics training came in handy there, and doing wire repair, and then drove it out to New Jersey. Discovered that I didn't really care for New Jersey, and went back to Minnesota, did a big job for a guy that owned a hunting lodge, 6,000 square feet, made like $1,100 for the day, and then I drove out to Missoula, Montana, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and that was in the summer. Well, I came back in the summer, like in July, overheated the bus. I blew up the bus engine. Then I learned the hard way that the bus engine was like $8,500. Is what they quoted me at Buffalo City Diesel in Jamestown, North Dakota. They said it was going to be $8,500 to put a used DT466 back in the bus. So I didn't have that. I got my little towed vehicle, my little Tacoma that I had behind the bus, and drove it back to Minneapolis and looked for window cleaning work, trying to come up with $8,500. I'd never had $8,500 in one time in my whole life, so I didn't really know what to do. Ended up losing my bus because I didn't have any. I tried selling it on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, stuff like that. I never found a buyer for it. Nobody wanted it. I didn't have the money to get it fixed, so I ended up losing it and everything in it. Yeah, life has strange ways. Since then, I had good years after that. Like just before COVID hit, I had driven for Uber all of 2019, and went out to California thinking that maybe driving for Uber in Sacramento and San Francisco would be better. It wasn't. I hated it. I hated California. And came back. I was on my way back from, I'd end up in Vegas, Henderson, Nevada area. Was taking pictures, Hoover Dam, that kind of stuff. Thought I was going to drive for Uber there, but they wanted like $300 in business licenses just to have a Uber business. Didn't have to do that in Minnesota, so I thought, no, I'm not going to burn $300 on red tape just to drive for Uber on stupid business licenses. For the city of Las Vegas and the state of Nevada, you had to have a business license for both. It was ridiculous. And was on my way back to Arkansas with what little bit of money I had in the Jetta Sport Wagon, and I decided to stop into Taos. I had my cameras at the time, and thought I would work, because Taos is known as an artist community. I thought I would try working on my photography there, but that didn't really work too well, and didn't work well at all. But I did start cleaning windows. I took my Jetta Sport Wagon back to the credit union, and got my little truck out of storage, and took my window cleaning truck back to New Mexico, and I cleaned windows for a couple of years in resort communities there. It was pretty decent demand, better demand than I'd had anywhere in the prior, the whole time I've been cleaning windows. So I actually had some pretty decent months in Angel Fire, but just like any other community, there's somebody that doesn't like you and somebody that needs to cause you problems. They don't have anything better to do. So that's what started happening there. People started noticing how busy I was and how I was making improvements on my vehicles and marketing, and started getting haters. And yep. So yeah, I really don't want to get into the details there. I ended up just leaving. I was involved in a bad accident one Saturday morning. This kid came over the pass. I was headed into Taos to go get a bite for breakfast because Angel Fire was still asleep. Nothing was open. I wanted some breakfast, so I was just going real slow up through the little bit of fresh snow, and I wasn't having any trouble, moving along. But I was almost to the top of the pass, and this Ford Excursion came flying over the hill, and he was immediately on ice, and he wasn't used to driving that vehicle. It was a rented vehicle that his friend had rented, and they were renting a place down in the canyon between Angel Fire and Taos. And he was on ice when he came over the pass, and he was in was a right-hand curve for him, and I was in a left-hand curve meeting him, and he came across to my lane and slammed across the front driver's corner of my truck, slammed me into the guardrail. Thank God the guardrail was there. I'd have been way off down in a ditch, probably with more damage than what I'd gotten. But it gave me whiplash, and it jammed my driver's door shut. And I basically had to drive a totaled vehicle for 2 months and go to the chiropractor for 2 months. And the chiropractor told me that I only owed him $600, but when insurance actually paid for it, he ended up billing my insurance settlement by almost like $2,000. So yeah, there's another person you think is a decent person. They're not. Yeah, crazy. So I eventually got the van I have now, and it's been surprisingly decent. I mean, I did have to do some work to it, and I've had to put wheel bearings on the front end a couple of times. That was expensive. Thank God my mom helped me. But life is strange. Tried helping my sister. My sister's an ass. Just, so many people in life are not very nice people. People you would think would be decent people, they're as wicked as a snake. And when I came back to Minnesota last winter, I decided to put in an application at Quick Trip, and I thought, wow, it sounds like a great place to work. Seemed friendly. Got hired right away. They offer profit sharing. I thought, okay, this is the place to work. They're offering profit sharing. Everybody's got a reason to work hard and get along and just do the right thing. No. That company is phony as a $3 bill. I put in probably 8 suggestions, to fix problems that they have at the store level. Never got any feedback whatsoever. Was basically told by the local store level management that nothing was ever going to be done about any of those issues. I was like, and this is a company that offers profit sharing. I mean, they have every reason to fix problems that are causing a lack of productivity, and they have every reason to fix issues that are causing confusion for business. And it's just, they just don't. I mean, they're nuts. They're insane. Yeah, makes you wonder. My nephew committed suicide couple of years ago, and he was going to college to be a firefighter. He decided to blow his brains out. So yeah, this is one crazy planet we live on. Thanks for listening. I hope that helped you.